My name is Ruby Mercer. I am 37 years old, and until the worst morning of my life, I believed success came down to discipline, taste, and trusting the people who loved you most. I had spent 10 years building Marrow and Pine into a luxury interior brand that people in Orange County actually respected. The kind of business that did not just sell furniture, but sold a feeling. That morning, my showroom in Newport Beach was glowing, the candles were lit, the samples were perfect, and a hotel group with money big enough to change my entire year was due to arrive in less than 10 minutes. Then my phone started buzzing in my hand. One banking alert became three became 7. I remember staring at the screen, still smiling at a client, thinking it had to be some stupid security glitch. It was not. By the time I logged in, more than $3 million had vanished from my company accounts in under an hour. Payroll was gone. Vendor reserves were gone. Tax money was gone. Everything I had worked for had been gutted so cleanly it felt less like theft and more like surgery. There was only one person besides me who had that kind of access, and the second I realized it, my whole body went cold. She had not panicked and made a mistake. She had planned it. While I was steaming out wrinkles and preparing for the biggest presentation of my career, she had drained my business dry and boarded a flight to Italy with the man she chose over her own family. I did not know it yet, but 3 nights later, the same woman who left me standing in the ruins of my company would call me sobbing and beg me to save her. I did not get the luxury of falling apart. The second the shock cleared, reality hit me harder than the theft itself. My launch was minutes away, my staff was looking at me for answers, and if I let panic show on my face, the whole room would smell blood. So I smiled through the opening, excused myself, walked straight into my office, locked the glass door behind me, and called the first person I trusted. Then I called the second. One of them had spent years untangling financial crimes, and the other knew exactly how fast money could disappear when the wrong person had a head start. Within an hour, both of them were sitting across from me while my untouched champagne went flat on the desk. They did not waste time offering comfort. They asked for bank logs, internal approvals, vendor emails, security footage, device records, anything that could prove this was not a misunderstanding between sisters, but a calculated theft. That was when the picture started turning uglier. She had not just moved money. She had prepared for this. She had changed authorization settings, routed funds through a shell company, and timed everything for the exact window when I would be too distracted to notice until it was too late. On camera, we found her standing in my office 2 days earlier, smiling like she belonged there, angling her phone just enough to capture the screen while I was pulled into a call. In the login history, her personal laptop lit up like a confession. In the email trail, there were quiet little edits, fake urgency, subtle reroutes, the kind of details only someone close to me could exploit. By sunset, my company was half frozen and half bleeding. Vendors were asking where their money was. 2 employees had already started whispering that something was wrong. My card for a routine purchase got declined in front of me, and I just stared at the cashier like I had forgotten how embarrassment worked. I went home that night to a silence so heavy it felt hostile. My business account was nearly wiped out, my name was about to start circulating for all the wrong reasons, and my own sister was somewhere over the Atlantic with my future in her carry-on. The worst part was not the money. It was realizing she must have watched me trust her every day and decided that trust was the easiest thing in the world to sell. By the 3rd day, my life no longer looked like something I recognized. My phone had become a machine for bad news. Vendors wanted answers I could not give them yet. A client who had been ready to sign a major contract suddenly needed more time to think, which was a polite way of saying the rumors were already starting to spread. One employee called in sick and never came back. Another asked me, very carefully, if payroll was safe, and I hated that I could not answer with the confidence I used to have. I barely slept. I lived on cold coffee, adrenaline, and the kind of rage that keeps your spine straight when your whole body wants to collapse. The two people helping me kept digging while I kept pretending my company was still standing on solid ground. They traced the transfers further, flagged the shell company she had used, and pushed every piece of evidence as far as it could go before the money vanished for good. I told myself I did not care where she was or what she was doing. That was a lie. I imagined her laughing over wine somewhere beautiful while I sat under dim kitchen lights, trying to decide which fire to put out first. Then on the third night, a little after 11, my phone started vibrating across the counter so hard it nearly fell onto the floor. Her name lit up the screen again and again. I stared at it for a full second before answering. The moment her face appeared, I knew something had gone wrong. She was not glowing in some glamorous vacation fantasy anymore. Her mascara had run, her hair looked wild, and behind her I could see expensive furniture, low golden light, and a room that looked too elegant for the panic in her voice. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. She kept saying my name like it hurt. "Ruby, please listen to me. Please help me." I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Her words came out broken and desperate. She said the cards were not working. She said the account had been frozen. She said the villa manager was threatening to call the police because the payment would not go through. Then her voice dropped even lower, and that was when I heard the real fear in it. Gavin was leaving. In the background, I caught a glimpse of him moving fast, shoving clothes into a bag, refusing to look at her while she begged him not to walk out. 3 days earlier, she had disappeared with my money like she had won. Now she was calling me from Italy like a drowning woman, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I understood something that made me go completely still. She had not called because she loved me. She had called because whatever fantasy she bought with my money was collapsing faster than she could run from it. I did not scream when she called. I did not ask the questions most people probably would have asked. I did not say, "How could you?" or "Why would you do this to me?" or "Do you have any idea what you have done?" By then, those questions felt useless. People like Celeste never steal because they are confused. They steal because they believe they deserve what is yours more than you do. So instead of giving her the emotional explosion she probably expected, I sat very still at my kitchen counter, held the phone in both hands, and let her unravel herself. She was crying so hard she kept losing control of her breathing. Her words came in pieces, tripping over each other. "Ruby, please, please just listen to me. I know how this looks. I know you hate me right now. I know I messed up. I know I did. But I swear I can explain this." The room around me was quiet except for her voice and the low hum of the refrigerator behind me. On the screen, she looked nothing like the woman who had flown out of California with my money and my future packed neatly into her fantasy. Her makeup was streaked, her eyes were swollen, and the expensive villa behind her suddenly looked less like luxury and more like a stage set that was falling apart around her. I could hear movement in the background, fast and nervous, the sound of drawers opening and slamming shut, hangers scraping, suitcase wheels hitting hardwood floors. Somebody was packing in a hurry. I already knew who it was. She kept talking, desperate to stay ahead of my silence. She said the money had not landed the way it was supposed to. She said part of it had gone through, part of it was being held, and every time she tried another card or another route, something got blocked. She said the villa manager had come by twice already asking for the balance. She said people were asking questions she could not answer. She said someone from the bank had used words like flagged transactions and verification review and beneficial ownership, and she did not know what any of it meant anymore. That was the first honest thing she had said. She absolutely knew what it meant. She just had not expected those words to ever be turned on her. I still said nothing. Silence is a cruel thing when the person on the other end needs it broken. She started filling it the way guilty people always do. Too much detail, too many explanations, too much panic to notice she was handing me pieces of the truth. She admitted she had set things up before she ever left. Not all at once, she said. Small changes, quiet ones. She had adjusted permissions inside the company over time so nothing would look dramatic. She had moved approval layers around. She had created an outside entity to receive part of the transfers. She said Gavin told her that if they did it all too fast, the bank might react. So they had tried to make parts of it look routine. Then she caught herself and started crying harder, like she suddenly realized what she had just confessed to. Ruby, I did not mean for it to turn into this. I swear I did not. It was supposed to be temporary. We were going to move it, use it, and put it back before you even understood what happened. There are lies so stupid they insult you twice, once with the crime, and once with the assumption that you are dumb enough to believe the excuse. She had drained more than $3 million from my company, wrecked my operating cash, triggered panic with vendors and payroll, and flown to Italy with her boyfriend. And now she wanted me to believe this had all been some temporary detour. What she really meant was simple. She thought I would be too trusting, too overwhelmed, and too emotionally tangled to hit back before she had already enjoyed the money. While she kept rambling, I looked over at Nolan and Adrian. They had both gone completely still in that focused way people do when the truth is unfolding exactly as they hoped it would. Nolan was already writing down key phrases, building the structure of her own words into something clean and devastating. Adrian was taking notes with the kind of patience that comes from hearing people destroy themselves in real time. Neither of them interrupted. Neither of them needed to. Celeste was doing all the work for us. Then Gavin stepped into frame. Just for a second. But 1 second was enough. He was carrying a half-zipped designer duffel, his face tight with anger, not fear. That mattered. Fear meant surprise. Anger meant the plan had gone wrong, and he was furious about being the one left standing in the wreckage. Celeste turned the phone slightly and begged him not to leave. Gavin, please. Please do not do this right now. Please. He did not even lower his voice. He snapped that she was panicking and making everything worse. He said this was exactly why he told her to keep her mouth shut and follow the plan. Then he said something that made my whole body go cold. He told her that if she had just handled her sister better, none of this would be happening. Her sister. Not Ruby. Not me. Her sister. Like I was not a person with a life he helped wreck. Just a variable in a bad strategy. Celeste started crying harder, reaching toward him with one hand while still clutching the phone with the other. She kept saying they were supposed to be in this together. That was the moment I knew she had finally understood what kind of man she had burned her family for. Men like Gavin love access, not loyalty. They love the thrill, not the fallout. He had no intention of going down beside her. He was already halfway out the door in his mind. He blamed her for freezing up. He blamed her for calling me. He blamed her for not fixing it fast enough. Then he walked out of frame, and a second later I heard a door slam somewhere deeper in the villa. The silence after that slam hit differently. It was the sound of her fantasy ending. Until then, some part of her had probably still believed the two of them would figure it out together, that they would outsmart the banks, the paperwork, the evidence, the consequences, and me. But the second he started leaving with whatever expensive scraps he could still carry, she stopped sounding like a partner in a glamorous escape and started sounding like exactly what she was, a woman who had detonated her own life for a man who did not even respect her enough to pretend he would stay. Her whole face changed after that. The manipulation dropped for a second, and what came through was raw fear. She lowered her voice and started speaking fast, like she was trying to crawl back into the role of my sister before it was too late. Ruby, listen to me. Please. Please just wire something. Anything. I cannot stay here. They are threatening to call the police if this is not settled tonight. I do not know who has been contacted already. I do not know what they know. I cannot do this by myself. I will fix it. I swear. I will pay you back. I will come home. Just please do not leave me here. The thing about people who betray you deeply is that they still believe your love belongs to them even after they weaponize it. She was not asking because she suddenly respected me. She was asking because she still believed I existed to absorb the impact of her choices. For years, I had been the one who explained her away, softened the consequences, filled the gaps, took the late-night calls, heard the excuses, and handed back pieces of safety she had done nothing to deserve. She was counting on that version of me now, the version who would hear fear in her voice and forget the body blow she had delivered to my life. But sitting there with the phone in my hand, listening to her cry in a foreign villa bought with my company's blood, something inside me went from shattered to sharp. I finally understood that this was not the moment to prove I was compassionate. This was the moment to prove I had learned. So when I spoke, I kept my voice low and steady. I told her she was not sorry for what she did. She was sorry the fantasy had stopped working. She was sorry the bank flags had caught up with her. She was sorry Gavin was leaving. She was sorry the bill had arrived. For 1 second, she just stared at me. Really stared. Like she had never heard me speak to her without guilt wrapped around every word. Then came a hard knock at her door. Not polite, not hesitant, firm, official. Her face drained so fast it was almost frightening to watch. She whispered my name like it was a prayer, like maybe there was still time for me to jump through the screen and become her shield one last time. But I was done. Done being the person she spent and then expected to recharge on command. Done confusing history with obligation. Done saving someone whose first instinct had been to bury me and then ask me for rescue when the burial failed. I looked at her for one last second, not with hatred, but with the kind of clarity that only comes after someone has shown you exactly who they are. Then I ended the call while she was still begging. The room around me went quiet again, but it was not the same helpless quiet I had been living in since the money disappeared. It was different now. Heavier, yes, but cleaner. Because for the first time since my sister stole from me, I did not feel like the victim trapped at the edge of someone else's cruelty. I felt the balance shifting. I felt her falling without me beneath her to break it. She called 7 more times before sunrise, and I heard every one of them because sleep had become something that belonged to other people. My phone kept lighting up on the kitchen counter, the same name flashing over and over like a ghost from a life I should have buried years earlier. The first calls were chaos. She could barely get a sentence out through the crying. Her voice shook so hard it sounded like her teeth were chattering. She kept saying my name, then saying she was sorry, then circling back to the same panicked questions. What did the bank know? Who had I talked to? Was there any way to stop this before it got worse? I did not answer those calls. I let them ring. I let her hear the silence she had left me with when I was the one staring at an empty account and a collapsing business. But I listened to every voicemail, and with each one I learned more. By the 4th call, the panic had started sharpening into strategy. She was still crying, but now she was choosing her words. She said Gavin had pushed her into it. She said he told her the money would be temporary, that they would move it, multiply it, bring it back before I ever understood what happened. She said she had only wanted one chance to stop living like the less successful sister, one chance to finally have the kind of life people envied instead of pitied. That almost made me laugh, because there was nothing pitiful about the life I had given her. I had trusted her with my books, paid her well, defended her when staff complained that she was careless, and treated her like family when everyone else in business told me never to mix blood with money. Even now, with my company choking on the damage she caused, some small, stupid part of me still wanted to hear one honest sentence from her. Not an excuse, not a performance, just the truth. Instead, every message gave me the same thing she had always given me whenever consequences finally found her: a new villain, a new explanation, a new reason she should not be held fully responsible for what she had done. By the fifth call, she stopped sounding hysterical and started sounding familiar, and that was somehow worse. She slipped into that softer voice she used whenever she wanted something from me, the one that made her sound fragile and misunderstood instead of selfish and dangerous. She reminded me of the apartment we shared after our mother died. She reminded me how I used to sit on the floor outside her room when she had nightmares. She told me I was the only person who had ever really known her heart. Then she asked me if I was really going to let her be destroyed over one terrible mistake. I sat there in my dark kitchen and stared at the phone after that message ended. One terrible mistake. She said it like she had scratched a car door, not drained more than $3 million out of my company, rerouted it through a shell entity, flown overseas with my money, and left me to face employees, clients, and vendors while my reputation bled out in real time. I think that was the moment something in me finally went still. Not cold, not cruel, just clear. Because people who are truly sorry talk about the damage they caused. They do not keep talking about the damage that is happening to them. While she was trying to pull me back into guilt, the case against her kept getting heavier. Nolan called me just after dawn with the kind of calm voice lawyers use when the facts are too ugly to dress up. The forensic review had uncovered weeks of preparation. Celeste had not acted on impulse. She had been setting the stage piece by piece, adjusting internal permissions in ways so small they would not trigger immediate suspicion, renaming transfer categories, delaying routine reconciliations, and creating paper trails that made ordinary activity look harmless. Adrian found access logs showing repeated late-night entries from her personal laptop, not just into the company books, but into old account settings no one had touched in months. Then came the ugliest part: draft emails. She had written them in advance and saved them, never sent, but ready if everything exploded. In those drafts, she had already built her escape route. Some suggested I had approved aggressive temporary transfers. Others hinted that I had been emotionally unstable and making erratic financial decisions because of stress. One even framed her as the concerned older sister trying to manage around my volatility. When Nolan read that part aloud, I had to set my coffee down because my hand started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the cup. She had not only stolen from me, she had prepared to bury me beneath the theft if she needed to. She had built herself a second crime out of my name and my reputation, just in case the first one failed. Any last trace of pity I had been clinging to cracked right there. Later that afternoon, Adrian gave me the next update. She was still being held in Italy while the financial review and local complaint process moved forward. The villa manager had filed over the unpaid charges. The bank flags had turned her luxury getaway into a cage. Gavin, true to form, had already started trying to separate himself from the situation, telling anyone who would listen that he did not understand where the money came from. Of course he did. Men like him always understand enough to enjoy the benefits and pretend innocence when the bill arrives. She left me one final voicemail that evening, and it was the only one that almost got to me. She was quieter then, not dramatic, not manipulative in the obvious way, just exhausted. She said she was scared. She said everything smelled unfamiliar and cold and she had not slept. She said every time a door opened, she thought someone was coming to tell her that her life was over. Then she said in this small, broken voice that she just wanted her sister. I listened to that message once, Then I played it again, not because I was weakening, but because I needed to hear it with my eyes open. I needed to remember that wanting comfort is not the same thing as deserving rescue. I needed to remember that the person asking for mercy was the same person who had counted on my love to protect her from consequences. By then, my staff still needed direction, my vendors still needed reassurance, and my company was still fighting for air. I did not have the luxury of becoming her lifeline again. I had spent too many years being the soft place she landed after every selfish choice. That role had nearly cost me everything. So I opened my phone, typed one message, and read it twice before sending it. I am not the reason your life is falling apart. I am just the first person who refused to keep cushioning the fall. Then I blocked her number, set the phone face down on the counter, and went back to the wreckage she had left me, because saving my future mattered more than comforting the person who tried to steal it. It took months to bring her back, and that was the part people on the outside never understand. They think justice arrives with the same speed as the betrayal, like the universe sees what happened and immediately balances the scales. It does not. Justice is slower, colder, more methodical. It moves through paperwork, hearings, sworn statements, document trails, digital forensics, and patient people who know how to build a case brick by brick until there is nowhere left to hide. While she sat in Italy trying to explain away what she had done, my life in California became a grind of survival. I kept marrow and pine alive by cutting every non-essential expense, renegotiating vendor terms, taking advances on future design contracts, and swallowing humiliation I would never have imagined surviving a year earlier. I learned exactly who believed in me when there was no glamour left in standing beside me. Some clients quietly backed away. Others stayed. A few surprised me with more loyalty than my own blood ever had. Through all of it, Adrian and Nolan kept working. Every transfer was traced. Every authorization change was mapped. Every deleted draft. Every altered setting. Every login from her personal devices. Every shell entity filing. Every attempt to disguise the money trail got pulled into the light. By the time the extradition process was finished and she was finally brought back to the United States, the fantasy she had tried to build in Italy was already dead. Gavin came back too, though not with the confidence he had left with. He had spent the first stretch trying to frame himself as a clueless boyfriend who just happened to enjoy five-star villas and designer luggage paid for with stolen funds. That story collapsed fast. Messages between them showed planning, timing, pressure, and celebration. He had not stumbled into a crime. He had packed for one. When the federal charges were finally filed, I sat in Nolan's office and read them in total silence. Wire fraud, conspiracy, unlawful financial transfers, falsified business records. It was strange seeing the destruction of my life translated into formal language on white paper. Strange and satisfying, because for the first time since that morning in my showroom, what happened to me was no longer a family tragedy people could reduce to private drama. It was what it had always been: a crime. The day I saw her in court, she looked older than I remembered. Not wiser. Just worn down in a way expensive skincare and soft lighting could never cover. She did not look like the woman who boarded a plane believing she had outsmarted everyone. She looked like someone who had run out of versions of the story to tell. Gavin sat a few feet away from her, stiff and pale, with the kind of empty expression men wear when charm has finally failed them. The evidence was devastating. Surveillance footage from my office, login records tied to her devices, company access changes made in careful stages, banking flags, shell company records, draft emails prepared in advance to shift blame onto me. And then there was the call from Italy. Her own voice, her own panic, Her own words admitting more than any prosecutor could have pulled out of her with 100 questions. I did not need to watch the jury or the judge to know how bad it was for them. I could feel it in the room. There is a moment in every collapse when performance stops working. That was theirs. When I was asked to speak, I stood up with my hands steadier than I expected. I had imagined that moment a dozen different ways over the months. In some versions, I was angry. In others, cold. In others, triumphant. But when it finally came, I was none of those things. I was clear. I said that losing money had been brutal, but losing trust had nearly destroyed something even bigger. I said my company had not just been a source of income. It was 10 years of sacrifice, risk, sleepless nights, and faith. I said the deepest wound was knowing that the person I let closest to the foundation had studied it carefully enough to know exactly where to break it. Then I looked straight at her and said, I did not lose my sister in Italy. I lost her the day she decided my trust was something she could cash out. She cried when the sentence came down. Not graceful tears, not movie tears. The kind that twist a face until it no longer looks like itself. She was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Gavin got 7. Assets tied to the stolen funds were seized. Accounts were frozen. Property and luxury purchases linked to the transfers were taken apart piece by piece until there was nothing left of the little empire they thought they had built out of my future. She looked at me one last time before she was led away, and in that look was everything she had not said honestly from the beginning. Shock, regret, fury, shame, maybe even the first flicker of understanding. I did not nod. I did not cry. I did not rescue her from that moment the way I had rescued her from 100 smaller ones growing up. I just sat there and let the consequences reach her without my body standing in the way. That was the real end of our story. Not the theft. Not the flight to Italy. Not the phone calls in the dark. This. The moment when she finally fell all the way down and discovered I was no longer underneath her to soften the ground. A year later, Marrow and Pine was still standing, and so was I. Not because I was stronger than anyone else by nature, and not because I walked through betrayal without scars, but because at some point I stopped measuring survival by whether I could keep everyone else comfortable. I started measuring it by whether I could still look myself in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back at me. The company she tried to destroy came back differently than before. Leaner, smarter, harder to wound. I rebuilt every system from the ground up, added layers of financial protection, hired people whose loyalty came from character instead of blood, and learned that professionalism will save you in places where love alone never can. Some clients returned because they respected the way I fought to keep my business alive. Others came because the story had spread, and they wanted to work with a woman who had been pushed to the edge and refused to disappear. But the real victory was never the money I recovered or the contracts I saved. It was peace. It was waking up without dread sitting on my chest. It was walking into my office and knowing that no one inside it had access to my life just because they shared my last name. Adrian and Nolan stayed in my world long after the case was over, and in a strange way, that became one of the clearest lessons of everything I survived. The people who helped carry me were not the ones tied to me by blood. They were the ones tied to me by integrity. They showed up when my name was under pressure, when my business looked unstable, when staying close to me offered no glamour and no advantage. That is what real loyalty looks like. It does not steal from you in secret and cry when it gets caught. It protects what matters even when things get ugly. I have been asked more than once whether I ever forgave my sister. The truth is, I stopped thinking about forgiveness the way people like to talk about it. I do not believe healing means pretending the damage was smaller than it was. I do not believe being a good person means reopening the door for someone who already proved they would burn your future to keep themselves warm. Some people hear the word boundaries and think it means bitterness. It does not. Boundaries are what remain when self-respect finally grows louder than guilt. They are the line between compassion and self-betrayal. They are the moment you understand that loving someone does not require handing them the knife again just because they say they are sorry. If there is one thing this taught me, it is that family is not an excuse. It is not permission. It is not a free pass to drain someone dry and expect mercy to refill the account. Real family does not feed on your trust. Real family does not gamble with your livelihood and then call you heartless when you refuse to save them from the consequences. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is let people meet the life they created without stepping in to protect them from it. And if you are holding on to someone right now only because you share blood, even though they have lied to you, used you, or made a habit of breaking you in ways no one else sees, ask yourself one honest question. If they were not family, would you still call what they do love? Because peace does not come from keeping every relationship alive. Sometimes peace begins the day you finally stop calling betrayal loyalty, stop confusing guilt with goodness, and choose yourself before the next wound has a chance to open. That was the lesson my sister paid for too late, and the one I earned at a price I will never forget. But I remember it every morning when I unlock my showroom, step into the light, and realize the life she tried to steal from me is still mine. At Revenge Argon, our team works hard to create stories that are not only dramatic and engaging, but also meaningful and memorable. We want to make it clear that this is a fictional story created to share helpful lessons, positive values, and educational messages with our viewers. After hearing this story, which character stood out to you the most, and why? Tell us in the comments who your favorite was and what kind of revenge story topic you want Revenge Argon to create next.